The quiet highlands of Elgeyo Marakwet, known for their green escarpments and peaceful villages perched above the Kerio Valley, turned into scenes of horror and heartbreak after days of heavy downpour unleashed deadly landslides. It all began in the late hours of Friday, November 1, 2025, when the skies that had been pouring for weeks opened again with greater intensity. Rivers swelled, hills trembled, and in the dark silence of Chezongok and nearby villages, the saturated earth finally gave way. What started as a distant rumble grew into a deafening roar as entire hillsides collapsed, sending walls of mud, boulders, and uprooted trees crashing down on sleeping homes. By dawn, what had once been villages filled with laughter and life had turned into muddy graves. In places like Mora, Kapsakom, Chezongok Center, and Kapkok, entire households were buried alive. Mothers clutched children in vain attempts to flee, others never made it out. Survivors described it as the sound of thunder followed by darkness and chaos. One villager, Stephen Kittoni, said he felt the ground shake beneath him before hearing the crack of splitting earth. He ran outside barefoot, calling for his family, only to watch his home swallowed by a wall of mud. In a few seconds, decades of life vanished under brown water and soil. By the following morning, the emergency services, Red Cross volunteers, and local youth had begun digging through the wreckage with their bare hands, calling out the names of the missing. The scale of devastation was overwhelming. Entire stretches of land had shifted, roads disappeared, bridges collapsed, and what used to be footpaths were now rivers of sludge. Bodies were pulled from the mud one by one, children, the elderly, and entire families. At least 21 people were confirmed dead that first day, and over 30 more remained unaccounted for. The death toll has since climbed to 26 as rescue efforts continue. Over 1,000 homes have been flattened, and thousands of families have been displaced. The Kenya Red Cross and the National Disaster Management Unit set up temporary rescue camps near Chezongok Trading Center, where survivors, mud-streaked and trembling, waited for food, blankets, and word of their loved ones. Helicopters from the Kenya Defense Forces hovered above, dropping supplies to areas cut off by broken roads, while soldiers and local rescuers waded through knee-deep mud searching for signs of life. 25 critically injured victims were airlifted to hospitals in Eldoret for treatment. Others were treated on site, their wounds bandaged under trees as rain continued to fall. The destruction did not end with human loss. Roads connecting Kapayago, Chisoi, and Kilongata were washed away, paralyzing transport. Power lines snapped, leaving the area in darkness. Schools that had just reopened were destroyed or inaccessible, and some learners taking national exams had to be airlifted to safety. Livestock were buried, farms destroyed, and rivers choked with debris. The once beautiful slopes of Elgeyo Marakwet East now lie scarred and broken. Government officials led by Interior Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen visited the site, calling the scene heartbreaking beyond words. The government pledged to cover funeral and hospital expenses for the victims and to resettle families living in danger zones. Heavy machinery was dispatched to clear roads, while teams of geologists were deployed to assess the risk of further slides. Still, the search for the missing goes on, now shifting from rescue to recovery as hope fades with each passing hour. For the families left behind, grief is their new reality. Mothers sit silently beside the ruins of their homes, staring at the mud that swallowed their children. Fathers dig through the debris, refusing to give up. In one heartbreaking scene, rescuers found the bodies of a mother and her 2 children still clinging to each other, their embrace preserved by the thick soil. Local churches and schools have opened their doors to offer shelter to survivors, while aid groups continue to distribute food, clothing, and medicine. Experts say the landslide was caused by a combination of prolonged heavy rains, steep terrain, and years of deforestation on the escarpment. With the short rains continuing across much of Kenya, there are fears that more slides could occur in other parts of the Rift Valley. Authorities have urged residents in high-risk areas to evacuate, but many have nowhere to go. For those who have lost everything, rebuilding seems impossible. They now depend on the kindness of neighbors, the support of the nation, and the mercy of nature itself. As the rain still falls softly over the hills, a haunting silence lingers over Chezengok. The cries for help have faded, replaced by the low hum of rescue trucks and the murmur of prayers. Villagers speak of the land as if it has turned against them, but deep down, they know it is the same soil that once gave them life and now demands their tears. Amid the wreckage, a few hold on to hope that the missing will be found, that homes can be rebuilt, and that someday the hills of Elgeyo Marakwet will heal again. The hills of Elgeyo Marakwet, once draped in green beauty, were now scarred by thick brown mud and scattered debris. The smell of wet earth and smoke from makeshift fires filled the air as survivors searched silently through the ruins of what had been their homes. Everything was gone, their houses, their crops, their neighbors, and, for many, the people they loved most. Among the survivors was Mary Jepkamoi, a mother of 3 who lost her husband and youngest daughter when the landslides struck in the night. She stood by what used to be her house, now just a patch of broken wood and torn iron sheets, staring at a small pink shoe she had found buried in the mud. "That's all I have left of her," she whispered to a Red Cross worker who stood beside her. Her surviving children clung to her dress, quiet and frightened. Every sound of falling stones from the hills sent them running. For Mary, grief had no words. The land she had always called home had turned into a graveyard. Across the valley, John Kiptu, the farmer in his 40s, worked with neighbors to dig through the debris with their bare hands. They were searching for 2 of his brothers who went missing that night. "We can't stop until we find them, even if it takes days," he said, his hands bleeding from the effort. Around him, young men sang softly as they dug, songs of courage, pain, and faith. It was their way of staying strong. For them, giving up would mean betraying the memory of those buried beneath the soil. At the temporary camp near Chezengok Trading Center, families huddled together under tents made of plastic sheets. The air was heavy with smoke from small fires that kept them warm at night. Women cooked maize porridge on stones while children sat quietly, many too shocked to speak. Volunteers from the Kenya Red Cross moved from tent to tent, offering blankets, food, and words of comfort. Doctors treated injuries and infections, but there were deeper wounds no medicine could heal. "We have seen floods before," said an elderly man named Cheboy, "but never have we lost so many in one night. The mountain broke our hearts." At night, the sound of rainfall returned, light at first, then heavier. The survivors froze, clutching one another, fearing the hills might move again. Some wept, others prayed aloud, asking God for mercy. Sleep became a rare comfort. The trauma lingered in every thunderclap and every gust of wind that passed through the camp. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, a sense of rebuilding began to take shape. Government officials and local leaders visited the area, promising new homes for the displaced. Aid trucks brought building materials, and teams of engineers began mapping safer zones where reconstruction could begin. The county government pledged to relocate families from high-risk areas and offer financial help to start over. But even with assistance, the emotional rebuilding proved harder than the physical one. For people like Mary, every morning was a battle between despair and determination. She joined a group of women who decided to plant new trees on the scarred slopes, hoping to restore stability to the land. "If the hills can heal, maybe our hearts will too," she said, as she pressed a small seedling into the wet soil. Around her, others were doing the same, planting not just trees, but hope. Children who had lost their schools were now attending lessons under temporary tents. Teachers who also lost their homes showed up daily to keep the learning spirit alive. They wrote lessons on blackboards made from old wooden doors salvaged from the wreckage. In one corner, the group of pupils sang a song about courage, their soft voices rising above the silence of the valley. Their innocence reminded everyone that even in loss, life must go on. The men began rebuilding homes from mud bricks and timber donated by neighboring communities. Some formed small work groups, helping each other to construct new shelters. The Kenya Defense Forces helped clear roads, reopening access to markets and hospitals. Churches held evening prayers, their candles flickering against the cold air as villagers came together to mourn, to remember, and to find strength. But the pain remains close. Every evening, as the sun sets behind the escarpment, the survivors gather near the riverbank for moments of silence. They speak the names of those who were lost, names that echo through the valley as if calling the souls home. Each name carries a story, a memory, a love that will never be forgotten. In the quiet of night, Mary looks up at the same stars she used to show her daughter. She says she believes those stars now watch over them. The mountain took her, she says, but heaven gave her peace. Around her, the hills stand still, humbled by what they have done. Weeks after the tragedy, signs of healing slowly emerge. Fresh grass begins to grow over the mud. Children's laughter returns to the camp. Neighbors who once lived far apart now share meals, stories, and hope. In their unity lies their strength. They have learned that even when the earth crumbles beneath them, the spirit of community can hold them up. For the people of Elgeyo Marakwet, the scars will never fully fade, neither from the land nor their hearts. But their resilience has become a story of courage for the entire nation. They are rebuilding with love, remembering those they lost with honor, and promising themselves that they will rise again. The hills may have fallen, but the people have not. Out of mud and mourning, a new chapter of hope begins to grow. In the days following the devastating landslides in Elgeyo Marakwet, a wave of urgency swept through Kenya. What began as a local tragedy quickly turned into a national call for help. From the moment news broke that entire villages in Chezangok and neighboring areas had been buried under mud, rescue teams, aid organizations, and ordinary citizens began mobilizing, racing against time, rain, and unstable terrain to save whoever might still be alive. The first to arrive were local villagers. With bare hands, hoes, and pongas, they dug through the thick layers of mud, calling out names, hoping for faint cries beneath the rubble. Many of them were survivors themselves, parents, siblings, and neighbors searching for their loved ones. As hours passed, their voices grew hoarse but their determination did not fade. Then, the Kenya Red Cross Society arrived, bringing with them trained rescuers, medical staff, and specialized equipment. They were joined soon after by the Kenya Defense Forces, KDF, National Police Service, and National Youth Service teams. Together, they began organized rescue missions across the slopes of Chezangok, Kapsecom, and Kapkok. The conditions were brutal. Roads had collapsed, rivers had overflowed, and the constant rain turned the rescue sites into slippery death traps. Vehicles could not pass through the main routes, forcing the teams to use helicopters to reach the most isolated areas. Red Cross volunteers used drones to map the extent of the destruction, identifying where homes had been buried. The KDF airlifted supplies, food, tents, medicine, and fuel, while police officers and local youths waded through knee-deep mud to recover bodies. In one heart-wrenching moment, rescuers found a child alive, clinging to a tree branch 2 kilometers from where her home once stood. She was airlifted to safety, becoming a rare symbol of hope in a landscape of sorrow. Interior Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen, who hails from the same county, flew to the disaster zone to oversee operations personally. Standing before the press and grieving families, he promised that the government would not rest until every missing person was accounted for. He announced that the state would cover medical bills for all the injured, provide burial support for the victims, and relocate those living in danger-prone zones to safer ground. He also directed that all schools and examination centers affected by the disaster would receive immediate assistance to ensure learners could continue with their studies. As the search continued, hundreds of volunteers from neighboring counties, Baringo, West Pokot, Uasin Gishu, and Trans Nzoia, traveled to Elgeyo Marakwet to help. Churches organized donation drives, collecting food, clothing, and blankets. Local radio stations aired appeals for blood donations, while youth groups in Eldoret and Iten gathered at collection points to send water, flour, and mattresses to the victims. Even Kenyan students abroad began online fundraising campaigns, sharing emotional videos calling for global support. Within days, the Kenyan spirit of Harambee, pulling together, was alive once more. The Kenya Red Cross set up medical tents in Chesongok Center and provided psychosocial support for traumatized survivors. Counselors sat under trees talking with children who had lost parents and families struggling with grief. Volunteers distributed hot meals and helped the elderly rebuild temporary shelters. The National Disaster Operations Center coordinated the rescue effort, ensuring every missing person report was logged and every survivor accounted for. Meanwhile, the Kenya Defense Forces engineers worked tirelessly to reopen destroyed roads. Bulldozers cleared debris from the Kapayago-Chisoi route, allowing supply trucks to finally reach cut-off villages. Helicopters dropped emergency food parcels to remote highlands where survivors had been stranded for days. The government also deployed geologists and environmental experts to assess the safety of the escarpment and recommend resettlement areas for the displaced families. Despite all these efforts, the emotional toll remained heavy. Every recovered body brought both relief and heartbreak, relief that a loved one was found, heartbreak that it was too late. The search teams often paused to pray beside the remains before transporting them to temporary morgues in Iten and Eldoret. The rain never stopped, drenching the workers, but they pressed on. "We can't give up now," said one rescuer, his clothes soaked in mud. "If even one more person is alive, it's worth everything." Donations from across the country began flowing in. Supermarkets in Eldoret sent truckloads of supplies. The Kenya Red Cross launched an emergency appeal that saw ordinary Kenyans contributing through mobile money. Religious leaders visited the affected families, offering prayers and hope. Governor Wesley Rotich of Elgeyo Marakwet set up a disaster coordination center and assured residents that the county would help rebuild homes once the search phase ended. The unity shown in those dark days became a light of its own. Across the country, Kenyans watched the footage on television, volunteers in red jackets pulling people from the mud, soldiers carrying children to safety, women crying beside coffins, and strangers comforting one another. It was a reminder of how tragedy can bring out the best of humanity. Today, even as rescue operations continue and the rains persist, the combined efforts of rescue teams, the government, and citizens have given the survivors something to hold on to, the belief that they are not alone. Camps are slowly transforming into organized centers with food distribution, medical care, and counseling. New tents have been set up, clean water systems installed, and vaccination drives started to prevent disease outbreaks. Every effort is being made to ensure that no one is left behind. In the midst of loss, hope has taken root in Elgeyo Marakwet. The sight of Red Cross volunteers embracing crying mothers, of KDF soldiers helping elderly villagers walk to safety, and of young people carrying supplies up the steep escarpment paths has become the true story of Kenya's heart. What began as a night of disaster has turned into a movement of compassion, a reminder that when tragedy strikes, Kenyans rise as one. And though the scars on the hills will take years to heal, the people of Elgeyo Marakwet now know that from the depths of destruction can come a powerful unity, one built on kindness, courage, and the simple, unbreakable will to keep going. To the people of Elgeyo Marakwet, and to every Kenyan touched by this tragedy, hold on to hope. Though the earth has shaken and the rains have taken so much, remember this: no storm lasts forever. The sun will rise again over your hills, and with it, new beginnings will come. You are not alone. The whole nation stands with you, in your pain, in your strength, and in your courage to rebuild. Every tear that falls will water the seeds of tomorrow's joy. Every broken home will one day become a place of laughter again. Let love lead the way. Let unity be your strength. For Kenya is strongest when her people stand together, hand in hand, heart to heart. The road ahead may be long, but together we will rise, we will rebuild, and we will heal. Hope is still alive. And from the soil of sorrow, a stronger Kenya will grow.